Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to r/MaliciousCompliance, where people follow exact orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, employees are getting back at their bosses yet again, guys. And OP tells a story about the time he follows his dumb Karen boss's orders, and it absolutely destroys her career. I hope you enjoy the stories. Don't shake your heads too hard. And as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So I worked in a bike shop for 8 years, and it was a brilliant and awful job. Awful being that I hated the owner. The guy literally gave no care in the world when it came to your well-being. If you were sick, the guy would drive to your house and knock on your door. He would then try to convince you to come to work. I gave into this bullying for years, coming into work. Throwing up out the back door while selling a bike was one of my personal favorites, especially when the customer expressed his worry to my boss and he got laughed off. Let's call the guy Asshat. Anyways, one December, the viruses were going around and everyone was getting it. Obviously, dealing with hundreds of customers a week, I was bound to get it. I got it, and I got it bad. I ended up bedridden on my day off, and I texted my boss that I wouldn't be in tomorrow, as I need to go to the doctor's. And that's when the phone starts ringing off the hook. Messages left, right, and center. And then comes the knocking at my door. I was sleeping, as my body was full-blown sick, and the guy shows up at my house. I couldn't answer it, as I could barely walk downstairs to do so. The guy was there for a good 20 minutes, just knocking and ringing the doorbell before he finally gave up. He messaged me later on that night, saying if I didn't come in the next day, then I would lose a day's pay because I was on a part-time contract at the time, but I was working full-time hours. And that's when it hit me. I can really screw him over here. I didn't need the money at the time, as I worked in a pub at nights as well, which topped my wages up quite generously. So I messaged him back saying, no problem, I'll just go on to my contracted part-time hours. I'll see you in 2 days when my shift starts again. And all I got back from him was a text that read, haha, okay. I came in 2 days later, still in awful condition, but I was able to get on with some work while coughing my lungs up. And my boss starts reeling off the Christmas orders. Now, for a bike shop, it's a military operation of booking so many bikes in a day to build and be collected. You'd get like 10 to 12 bikes in to build for the next day. And on top of that, you have to make sure today's bikes were picked up or moved back into storage. That alone is a full day's job, on top of selling bikes and parts, etc. So you'll build around 220 to 270 bikes in December alone, just for Christmas, on top of any other sales you might get on the day. So roll on my first day back. I get my bikes built, get the customer served, all sorted. This was the Wednesday, so I tell Asshat that I'll see him Friday, as that was my next contracted day. At that he says, no, you'll be here tomorrow. We've got a lot going on this month. I respond, no, I'm part-time. I won't be in. Contract says so. He then tells me, stop being like that. Get your ass in tomorrow. And sure enough, I didn't come in. Come Christmas Eve, it's the biggest effing mess that you've ever seen. There was bikes everywhere. There was no one collecting them, and those who did come, their bikes haven't been built. It was the worst Christmas ever recorded in that shop. And no one was paying for bikes because they couldn't collect them due to not being built, and Asshat was so flustered. So guess who got handed a lovely shiny full-time contract with sick days, a higher wage, and an apology on New Year's Eve? Yours truly. I was there for another year, and I never got bugged for taking a sick day again. Oh man, guys, I love it when employees stick it to the store owners and they end up winning in the end. And kudos to the store owner for recognizing OP as a valuable employee and being less of an a-hole in the end. What a win-win situation. With that said though, I'm pretty sure it's a huge no-no to force sick employees to come into work when they have a doctor's note. And an even bigger no-no is going to employees' homes to harass them because they're sick. Thankfully, it all worked out in the end for OP. So here's a little bit of backstory. For about 3 years, I worked at a large chain store in the electronics department. It was my first job out of high school, and thanks to a combination of me being a tech nerd and a couple of kind coworkers, I picked up on not only the job, but our products quite easily. I knew what I was doing within the month, and before the year was over, I was a contender to take the department manager's position when he left. I ended up not getting the position, but that's a story for another time. Fast forward 2 years, and the company restructures its stores. Basically, instead of working a particular department, now you do one job across the entire store. So now you have people who specialized in, say, fashion, forced to do price changes all over the store in departments they don't know. Nobody likes the changes, and over the next few months, over half the staff quits, including the entire electronics team. All except for me. I am now the only person in the entire store with the knowledge and experience to run electronics, management included, as many of them were replaced during the restructuring. As one of our highest staffed and highest profit departments, they know they're done without me, so they bend over backwards to make sure I stay on. If I'm at work, I'm in electronics, and if I want to do something, no one questions it. They know I'm the only one who knows what I'm doing. I'm the only person in the store with this privilege. Now onto the malicious compliance. So after about a year, my manager who worked out the deal with me to let me run electronics leaves, and that's when a new manager from after restructuring takes over. Technically, my job title is Customer Experience Specialist. Basically, all I'm supposed to do is customer service. Stock, well, that's a different team. Price changes and layout changes, different teams as well. Unofficially, I do it all for electronics because the few times other people did it, I spent my entire next shift cleaning up their mistakes, and I made sure management knew it. So the new manager finds me rearranging a section one day, preparing for some new stock to come in with the release of a new iPhone. I'm stocking cases for it and such. Well, the guy throws a fit and he tells me I'm not supposed to be doing that. It's not my job. At first, I try explaining why I'm taking care of it, but he doesn't want to listen. I just kind of ignore him and try to placate him until he wanders off, and then go back to my work. Well, apparently he sees this because the next day, he writes me up and he tells me I need to obey him. And that's when I think, fine, if you don't want me doing things beyond my job, so be it. I've been working here way too long to care. So for the next 3 weeks, I do nothing except customer service. If there's no customers in the department, I'm standing behind the till, paid to do nothing. I watch as the shelves empty, with no one stocking them or correcting for the items getting stolen. Our back room is overflowing with electronic stuff that can't go out because the new shelf layouts haven't been done. Everyone thought that I would do it, but I didn't. So a month goes by and management's freaking out. Our profits are way down and the back room is a mess. The shelves are also barren. They're wondering what's going on. Meanwhile, I'm sipping my drink, standing behind my till. Finally, they realize what happened. The manager that started it all is quietly shuffled into the back room, and that's when I get a new one, who tries to work out a new deal with me. The store-wide inventory is coming up in 2 months, and it's gonna be a disaster, unless I step in and save them. That's when I hand in my 2 weeks notice. I've been applying for other jobs during my hiatus, and I got hired by a cell phone company, who operates the cell phone kiosks for my company. I request to be put in my store, and the request is granted. Now here I am, just watching from behind my kiosk as electronics just goes down in flames. The profits are through the floor, and the inventory check was the worst I've ever heard of. As a result, the store's budget is cut. I told them when I gave them my notice to have me train someone, but they didn't have the hours to spare. They really don't have the hours now. Oh boy, that would have been so satisfying to watch, especially after they rejected that lifeline that OP threw at them, saying they'd train a new person to replace him leaving. And seriously, what OP did when they left that job was such a boss move, like requesting to work at the cell phone kiosk in the store just to be able to watch all the crap hit the fan was frickin' brilliant. What an awesome move. So this happened a few years ago, and I will be vague since I'm not sure if the dust has fully settled from this fiasco yet. At my former company, I was the secretary for a small improvement team that would meet monthly to discuss issues within the company and brainstorm ways to fix them. Now, something you need to know about me is I was given this role because people know I'm meticulous at keeping records, due to HR-related issues I had at a previous place of employment. I also don't think my boss realized that this careful record keeping applied to her as well, especially when she appointed me to be secretary of this little committee, but I digress. I was a model employee, and I often went above and beyond what was asked, as were many others in my department. But we were still having customer complaints and dealt with regular safety issues, due to the company at large and through no fault of our own. When we brought these concerns to our boss's attention, emails were left unread, and during in-person exchanges, we were called whiny, needy, and we were told that we just needed to deal with it. Whatever the issue, from items being stolen by customers to people being unhappy with the procedures the boss had set us to follow, it was always made to somehow be our fault. When we sought support from other departments, we were met with cold indifference, since the boss was great to them, and we must be exaggerating the things she said to us. Well, during an improvement meeting at the end of the year, it all came to a head. Myself and a couple of my team members dug our heels in, and we were insistent about the unresolved issues that the boss refused to acknowledge, and she finally went off on us. She told us everyone's incompetent, that we don't deserve our jobs, and that maybe customers would like us more if we were likable. When we pressed her on safety issues, she continued to reiterate that we would just have to deal with it, and that if, quote, someone was gonna die, they already would have, right? So I, as the secretary, did my duty, and I took notes of all that happened over the course of that meeting. I usually did bullet points, but that night, I was feeling a little more thorough, so I wrote down words. Every word that was said, every hateful comment, denial of accountability, and idle threat that my boss made was recorded in black and white. Now, a second part of my job was to distribute the notes from the improvement meeting to the rest of the company. So come the next morning, I ran about 100 copies of the transcript of the meeting, and I hand-delivered them to every single department in the building. And things blew up. People from other departments who attended the meeting were able to verify that everything I typed up had really been said. And folks were mad. People were threatening to quit, refusing to do their normal duties, browsing for new jobs during work, etc. That's when my boss's boss got wind of what's going on. She pulled me aside, and we had an hour-long, off-the-record conversation about all the safety issues I'd documented, all the concerns I'd submitted to management in writing, and all the records I had regarding my boss's inaction. She was very grateful for the 100 pages of documentation I sent over, and she thanked me for my time. The day after I unleashed Pandora's box, I put in my 2 weeks notice. I took a new job and I pieced out to greener pastures. And at first, it seemed like things were calming down after I left, but the company did not renew my boss's contract. I still feel a bit bad because I wasn't trying to get her fired or ruin her life. I was just desperate for some accountability thrown her way to create some positive change in the company. But at the end of the day, I just did what she asked me to do. Honestly, I would not feel bad at all. Like, OP did not ruin her life. She did. Because a boss like that, one who constantly shrugs off safety issues, does need to be fired. And the fact that she even said out loud, if someone was gonna die, they probably would have already, shows how little she actually cares about the issue. And seriously, if she doesn't care if someone died, why would she care if she lost her job? Good frickin' riddance. A few years ago, I was a department manager for a large conference center. I ran the top performing department by a large margin. Like, no other department out of 1,200 employees was even close. And my dress style was always nice and professional. The dress code didn't say that we needed to have button-up shirts and ties, but I did it anyways because it looked great and professional. And I met with the leaders of large conferences multiple times per day. I dressed to impress. They were my clients, and whatever their problem was, I was gonna fix it. My demeanor and professional attire did great things to alleviate their concerns. That's when my bosses got on a dress code kick for some reason. They made me and my small department of 6 people total start wearing lame, colorful standard shirts with a logo on front. The rationale was that the client should be able to identify me as a staff member, and I do get the logic, but that's what my lanyard and name badge were for. Plus, the bright and colorful dress code shirt was actually detrimental to my work, as I often worked backstage as a tech during band performances. The industry standard color for techs is black, but they wanted me to wear bright yellow. So I tell them my concerns for my shirt's bright colors being a distraction for the audience, as I do work backstage. But my bosses don't care. They made up a new dress code and they want me to follow it. So I think, fine. So I wear the shirt, but I also wear a nice sweater vest or vest on top of it. I've still got my tie on. I like ties. But to make it explicitly clear that I'm staff, I get my own hat made, at my own expense, that shows the company's name on it. Again, my badge and lanyard are always visible, but now I can do my backstage work without being a distraction to the audience that might glimpse my movement as I go about changing scenes, etc. But then, my bosses tell me that my company's logo has to be visible on my shirt, and therefore I can't wear a vest. So then, I get the company's logo embroidered on my shirt sleeve, also at personal expense. And I'm thinking, problem solved, right? I'm wearing the shirt they gave me, and the company's logo is visible. At this point, my boss is pissed at me, and he's trying to write me up for any possible infringement of company policies. Now I know how to read a room, and I immediately start going to the HR director to approve of my new and evolving malicious compliances of this ever-changing dress code policy. My boss says we can't wear hats. Okay, fine, my hair is visible for all to see, and I quickly become aware of the next thing my bosses are gonna tell me to fix, which is my hair. They're going to cite some vague language in the employee handbook about hair length. So I go to the HR director preemptively, and I ask for a clarification for hair length. After a 10-minute conversation, we both agree that I'm perfectly fine with nothing to worry about. My hair's nice, it's in a bun, and it looks good. It's well kept and stylish, and my specific clientele actually really like it because they're mostly hipsters anyway. But of course, my bosses don't see it that way. They say my hair's too long and it needs to be cut. I ask them how long is too long. I am, after all, a rule follower, and I will obey the rules. That's when one of my bosses, a woman with long hair that's actually against dress code because it's not put up in a bun, says my hair should be less than shoulder length. And I want to note, my hair was in a man bun. I then ask her if that policy extends to women as well. She says no, obviously, that this dress code only applies to men. Apologetically and feigning ignorance, I ask her to show me where it says in the employee handbook. So she shows me the section where it says that if hair is longer than shoulder length, regardless of gender, it should be kept in a bun. I then tell her that my hair is in a bun as opposed to hers. And oh man, it's now getting real. I just called them out and they're not happy. That's when my other boss, a guy with super short hair less than 1/4 of an inch long, tells me that as a guy, my hair should never touch my shirt's collar. He even tells me that a few stray hairs of mine are touching my collar. So I pull out my phone and I take a picture of him. I show him that even his 1/4 inch hair is touching the collar, as his head was leaned back and his hair was touching his collar. I ask him again to clarify how long is too long, because a 1/4 inch hair is too long for their standards. And here's a side note, I love my thick hair, and someone telling me to cut it arbitrarily speaks fighting words. They then tell me that I just need to do what I'm told, because they're bosses and it's company policy, and if I don't do it, they'll get HR involved. I tell them I got HR involved, and HR told me that my hair was perfectly fine. But these two bosses of mine wouldn't let it go. They had to go after my hair. They told me that since I'm a manager and I meet with group leaders, I have to go above and beyond what the dress code says, and I have to act professional in order for us to receive a good guest feedback. So I tell them that me and my department are already the most professional and highest rated department according to the guest feedback surveys. I then take a printout of the survey results out of my bag, and I show them the survey. They read it, toss the paper aside, tell me to cut my hair or be written up. So I think, fine. The next day, I come into work with a shaved head. They told me to never cut my hair again because I look far worse with no hair. Coincidentally, they also let me wear my hat again, but only because my shaved head was a sore sight. As a point of interest, when I resigned from my position a year later, I submitted to HR my 80-point paper. Why my two bosses caused me to leave the organization, how they stifled me in my department from doing good and quality work, and how I felt that under their leadership, I was incapable of ever winning. A month after I left, I heard from a friend and a previous coworker who was still at the company that my direct boss was forced to retire and my other boss was fired. My friend told me that they were privy to a conversation held between the CEO and my female boss, the one who's fired. And my friend overheard the CEO say, "Your time here at the company is over, and I want you to know that when you're gone, your position will not be filled. Consider you and your position eliminated." I haven't cut my hair since I left. It's almost 3 feet long now, and I plan on giving my gorgeous lion's mane away to some charity that deals with making wigs for kids. Oh my goodness, serves those two right. Like, why try so hard to pick on the person who single-handedly runs a top-performing department? Like, that makes absolutely no sense, and that's what they get. I only wish the CEO contacted OP after those two got sacked and offered OP their job back with whatever they wanted. Because employees like that who do their job and do it really well are super duper hard to replace. And to that Karen boss, holy. Like, when you do such a terrible job that even the job itself is eliminated when you're gone. That speaks volumes. So this is the story of my former employer. My boss was the kind of boss that every employee hates. Corners were cut every possible way in order to keep overhead costs down. On top of that, he would constantly overbook on jobs, which would result in employees often working 14-hour days or more, which really sucks when you're on salary, and no overtime. His worst attribute by far was approving time off, and then during your time off, he would call or text you asking if you would be willing to work a day or cut your vacation short. Sometimes, he would even ask you to move your time off to the next week or next month when the workload lightens up. And here's something, it never lightened up due to his constant overbooking. So after working at the company for 6 years, I got used to all the aforementioned annoyances. But then things changed. My son was born. In the months leading up to his birth, I made it very clear that I would be taking a 5-week unpaid leave of absence once he arrives. The state we're in allows parents to take up to 8 weeks of unpaid leave. So I told my boss that I know 8 weeks would be a huge strain on such a small company. So I was willing to take 5 weeks, but those 5 weeks completely off the grid. Meaning, don't call me, don't text me, and if you're gonna ask me anything work-related, the answer will be no, so don't bother. My boss agreed 100%. So fast forward to my son's birth. My son was born on the weekend, and Monday we took him home. On Tuesday morning, I wake up to a missed call, an email, and 3 texts, all from my boss, asking me to call him back as soon as possible. Now, for reasons still unknown to me to this day, I call him back, and he tells me there's a slight emergency, which is code for he screwed up the scheduling, and he has a job with no employee at it. And he asked if I could come into work that day, and maybe work a couple of more days that week, until he finds someone to cover it. And hearing him say that, I lost it. I unleashed a verbal assault on him that I still feel bad about now, a year later. Obviously, he wasn't a fan of what I said, and after a small rant of his own, he ends with the sentences that made this whole story possible. My boss said to me, "You've got a really good gig at this company that most people your age would be thankful for. I would be impressed if you could find a better job because I've been doing this for 30 years. And trust me, good jobs like yours don't come along very often, so think about that." So we end the call, and I did what he said. I thought about it. And after thinking about it for 30 seconds, I get out of bed, sit down in front of my computer, and start looking at job postings. 5 weeks later, my time off came to an end. And my first day back, I came into work. I walked into my boss's office, and I hand him a piece of paper. My boss says, "What's this?" I tell him, "Well, I thought about what you said, how you'd be really impressed if I could find a better job than the one I have. So I did." My boss reads over what I hand him, which is a job offer from a competitor for the exact same job I was performing, but at a 25% higher salary. Also, an extra week of paid vacation compared to what I had, and the stipulation that the company policy was that work hours are capped at 8 hours per day, meaning once I hit 8 hours on the job, I pack up and leave until tomorrow. No exceptions. My boss just says, "Well, can I have the day to crunch some numbers to come up with a counter offer?" I just tell him, "No, don't bother. I just wanted you to see it because I know you wouldn't have believed me otherwise." I then gave my 2-week notice. That was over a year ago, and I could not be happier with my new job. I get to spend lots of time with my boy, and that's the best job perk there is. Yep, and I absolutely love how OP called the guy's bluff. Like, what an a-hole boss that guy was. And seriously, I've worked for bosses like that before, guys, who are always like, oh, you'd never find anything good out there. There's nothing for people like you. Only to have people move on and love their new job and realize that it's way, way better than that crap hole they used to work at. So yeah, the lesson here is don't F with your employees, especially the good ones. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/malicious compliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed yesterday's episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled people episode, where a psycho Karen infects OP's baby with a virus. Guys, it's such a wild story, so go check it out if you haven't, and myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.